Hello! Today we are here to discuss Ring Circus. This is one of the hot Gen Con sellers.
Yep.
Sold out, I think, day one, didn't it? Because you got an
an
IOU for it.
Yep.
So they mailed it to you, but they sent it like right after.
Yeah, it was like, I think I got it 3 days after I got back. It was like really quick.
Yeah. So before we get into any further discussion, I'll make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell down there so you can follow along on all of our escapades and circus performances. I mean, you never know. We might.
He's definitely the clown.
Trappy. So. Yeah. All right. So, Carney Rob, what can you tell us about this game?
All right, so this is a 2023 release. The overall rank is 4,148, and it's rated 7.7. It plays 1 to 4 people, and it's about 45 to 75 minutes. Definitely closer to the 75-minute side of things. Ages 12 and up. Designed by Remo Conzadori and Fabio Lopiano. Art by, I apologize if I butcher this, but Edu Vals. Published by Devir Games. MSRP is $39.99, but I've seen it pretty readily available for $31.99. I saw it for Card House, Atomic Empire, Boardlandia, Game Nerds, all of them selling it for the same price of $31.99. For whatever reason, Geek Market's selling it between $35 to $40. So it's not the cheapest as it usually is.
Yeah, well, for a Devir game, though, this is actually on the cheap side.
Yes, for sure.
Devir games are fairly heavy.
Yeah.
And this one's probably a medium level. I don't think it's that light, but it's also not that heavy.
Right. I agree.
It's as far as their heavier strategy games, this is definitely a lighter one. Moving on to quality of components. So this one, you get first of all, this is a small box.
It is.
For a Devir game.
It's a big game for a small box.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a much bigger game.
Yeah.
So you get a 6-fold board that is, a decent sized board. It's not huge, but it's decent sized. You get player boards that fold out that are also, they're actually about a little bigger than a quarter of the size of the center board.
And based off the number of players, there's a section that will block off part of the map.
Yeah.
Got a ton of cards.
All the cards are small size, though.
Yeah. But they really, there's a little bit of a linen finish, not much.
No.
And they're not super thick either. They're not horrible quality cards,
but they do want to bend when you're shuffling, so you got to be careful because those small cards, you don't have a lot of grip on them when you're trying to do a riffle shuffle.
So they can fly everywhere and stay bent.
Yeah. So that was my only complaint. I definitely will want to sleeve these, and then you're still going to have trouble potentially shuffling them because they're small size, but it'll be at least less likely to bend. But the really cool pieces are the tents. They just really draw your attention. They're wooden tents, and they did do like a painting pattern on it, like what you would see on the top of a big top circus tent. And then you've got a lot of little markers, and they are all screen printed. They did like popcorn for your victory points. Like it looks like a popcorn container.
You got a little pedestal for when someone's your elephant would step on or something like that.
Yep. So everything is painted, which is really cool. As far as the version that we got at Gen Con, I think there was a little promo pack of cards that was inserted. That's the only difference between what you would get retail, I believe, and what we got. It's buying this early at Gen Con.
And, and without looking, it might even be available on their website or something. So there
are a few cardboard tokens. The cardboard's good quality. It's not real thin, not real thick.
Yeah.
And it does have a linen finish on it. It's two-sided as well, so it gives you different perks and not really perks.
Yeah, because you literally flip it to see which side it lands on, and then you randomly put it in a different city.
So quality component wise, I'm probably going to give this one, I think probably a 7.5. I think is where
I think 7.5 is a good score, especially with the screen printing of the tents. It just really is eye popping. Yeah, it's really neat.
Oh, and you do have custom little carriages that are cut out, and they have a wooden Barnum and Bailey circus trailer.
Right.
It has no train, though. I guess it's like Christine. It's a trailer that just moves on its own. Might run over people. We don't know.
Oh, no.
So, But apart from that, it's screen printed multicolored, too.
Yeah,
which is
it's got
cool.
like a U.S. flag type motif on it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So yeah, moving on to the theme. So the theme, obviously, you are circus owners and you're putting on performances in competition with Barnum and Bailey, who's
Right.
Traveling ahead of you, kind of, or you're trying to keep up with them and score before they seal off an area. In essence,
Right.
you can still score there, but your bonuses are for having tents already in the area when it goes and scores that region. So in essence, you want to stay ahead of Barnum and Bailey.
Right.
You're doing that by collecting performers for your circus and putting them into play on your board, which is going to give you perks for each of the things you cover, or you're going to lose some of the perks that you started the game with as far as movement.
Yep.
And some various other stats that you might get. But you also, that's how you unlock victory points, and you
can potentially get perks back if you play the right cards.
Yeah, some of the cards will have some of the starting perks on them. So, matter of fact, that's what I did was when I covered up locomotives, I replaced them with locomotives so I could stay moving and not have to worry about it. I only had 3 movement at the end, but at that point it didn't matter because you get to skip all the places where tents are. So it is kind of a race around the board game. You've got the different cities. It's cool that they feature our neck of the woods.
Yeah, it's got Indianapolis on the board, so it's kind of neat. So Chicago,
it's got the upper East Coast and central areas, and then it's the art is kind of cutesy. It's cartoonish for the different,
but I think it's very well done, though.
Yeah,
I really like the art. Now it is. Based off of the number, I mean, you might see some of the artwork get used a couple different times, but there's still a lot of artwork in it, though. Yeah. So you could really tell they put a lot of work in it.
I also like that some of the art comes out of the page for you. You've got there's lions that are just kind of standing there posing, and then you have lions that are just bursting out angry at you, which is really cool.
That is pretty cool.
So the board itself, it's fairly basic. It's just kind of different toned regions, but it makes it easy to see.
And not only that, once you get the big top tokens on there, it just kind of pops. Yeah, so it's kind of neat.
So it looks like the circus has kind of taken over the
United States.
States. We're being invaded. It's the red-nosed on.
Oh wow! Sorry.
Yeah. All right. So I think they've done an outstanding job. I like the fact that the way the lettering works, it fits with the team. The circus spreading across the area makes sense.
For sure.
The art is pretty, and it's very cartoonish, although I do love the penguins with the party hats and the ties on them. That's really cool. But there's nothing outstanding about it, but it all works. And I do think that the tents look really cool on the board, especially as you mentioned, as it fills up. I'll probably go ahead and give this thematically an 8.
I'm going to go a little bit higher just because I think that the quality of the artwork is really, really good. I'm going to give it an 8.5 because some of the acrobats that they got on here, they look phenomenal. So I'm going to give it 8.5.
And I will say the iconography also makes a lot of sense.
It really does.
It's very intuitive.
It does.
All right, so moving on to the rule book. Matter of fact, this game, for being as small as the box is, comes with 5 rule books for different languages.
It's the international version.
Yes, so you get your choice of languages, but we chose English because it's the only one we know. The book is 28 pages, but it's a small box. It has to be because it fit in that box.
The last couple pages have a lot of information about the cards, the iconography and stuff like that. So as far as actual rules go, how many?
It goes to 18, but. And there's part of that, obviously, is the component listing with the pictures. The setup. The setup is done pretty well in here.
The font's pretty small.
The font is a little small, but again, you've got a book.
No, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that it's that small, but it is pretty small.
Yeah.
I don't think I think I cracked my copy open, but I don't think I've unbagged it yet. So I didn't realize how small the font was.
Yeah, I will say, I think the rulebook made it feel a little more intimidating than the game actually is once you start playing it.
I could see that.
And there are a lot of typos that were in here I think there was one where it called it a circus tent, but that
You
was
think
a
it's
no big
typos,
deal.
or do you think it might have been translation?
Well, there's that. Well, I think that was a typo. But I think the bigger issues we've found ones where it said like town when it doesn't say small town.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some references to where you could play things and where you could skip things. That
Right.
It was leaving some of the words that were kind of important keywords
Right.
out, but then the example would show it.
Kind of fill it in.
Yeah, clarify it. So, yeah, I think it's not a huge deal, but if you were literally translating and reading this book and try to interpret the rules from it, you could get mixed up by some of that. Given the fact that it's got such pretty good examples, I don't think I'm going to take off much for it. There's a page of variant rules to it. There's not much change in them really, and then there's the solo play automaton show, the spectacular automaton show, and it runs from page 19 back to page.
And there's a decent stack of cards that's for the automaton as well. So I'll be interested in trying this out solo. See what it's like.
Yeah. So I think they've done a very good job explaining the rules in a short, brief book. I'm probably going to go ahead and give this I'll give it a 7.5 because of concerns about it, some of the typos, and some of the leaving out some of the keywords. But
sounds good.
It's still a good rule book. All right, moving on to gameplay. So at the beginning of the game, you're not going to have any of these tents on the board. It would be empty except for the Barnum and Bailey car would be taking up one of the cities on the board where you can basically place it in... you would start it in Boston or New York, but in our case, we chose Boston not to be there, so it was New York. Everybody else is going to have a little card that represents their circus.
And based off a starting player, they'll pick one of the other cities.
One of the major cities.
Yeah, major cities.
Yeah. And there's going to be one more of the major cities than there are number of players.
Right.
So one is going to be occupied by Barnum, and you have to pick one of the other ones. So all of the major cities will have somebody's circus cart on them at the beginning of the game. Then on your first turn, you're going to play a performer into your area. And your performers, you're going to get dealt a ticket, which gives you a kind of a higher cost performers.
Right.
Generally, those are going to give you victory points, although some of the cheaper ones will give you like an icon that's going to help you. And then you'll also be dealt 4 cards that are money cards that can be used for spending to buy the ticketed cards. Or you can play, some of them will have icons and be actually performers themselves.
Right.
They're weaker, they don't give you as much of a bonus, but they can help you build up your pedestal, which is important for going to some of the mid-sized cities, which we'll get to in a moment.
And there's also instant cards that can kind of help you get, when you do a performance, it could either maybe give you some money cards, or it could help with those pedestals, or just kind of a one-time, but usually pretty useful effect.
You'll also be dealt 1 in-game bonus card.
Right.
These you won't be able to play right away. They will stay in your hand for a while, because once you put down performers to complete a column on your board, you will get to play one of those cards for free.
And Randy made the point earlier, and I agree. The good thing about them is that they're fairly easy to complete.
Yeah. The bad thing about them is you draw the top card and you're stuck with it. There's only 3. You get dealt 1 at the beginning. There's 2 spots to gain additional ones.
But again, it's just drawing off the top, and that's what you get.
And you've got 3 that you can play during the course of the game. So you're only going to net 3 cards, and you're only going to be able to play 3 cards. And they take up a space because you have a hand limit of 10 cards every round. So they take up a spot in your hand while you can't.
And the other thing I do like, we didn't talk about it when we got done playing the first time, but I do like that the scoring for all of them are the same.
Yeah.
How you score is different, but the points are the same.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be one broken compared to something else.
Yeah. So, and they're, like I said, they're very achievable.
Yeah.
So even if you didn't focus on that right away and you drew one and it didn't
it's not going to be hard.
It won't be hard to catch up to it. On a normal turn, after you've played that first turn, you're either going to take another action of playing a card on a turn. And not, when I say another, that would be your turn. It would be your next turn.
You get 2 options.
Yeah. You can either play a card, or you can do a performance. So you're going to spend about 50% of the time playing cards, 50% doing performances typically. So when you do a performance, the first thing you have to do is move your cart, because the city that gets bored with your performance, they don't want to see you continue to perform there. So they want you to move your circus.
And it's by train. So just so you know.
So you move to up to your limit, which at the beginning of the game, you're going to have trains that are already printed on your board. So you'll have 6 movement.
Right.
That's going to probably go down during the course of the game, because as you play cards, it's going to cover up those icons. So if I were starting at Chicago, I could move 6 spaces, and I don't count any tents that are along my way. I can perform in small towns, I can perform in medium towns, and I can perform in the large cities. So if I choose to perform in a small town, let's take that off, and I go here, I then can play, I get a circus tent in that town, and I get to count how many empty small towns are adjacent to it. So I get a money card for performing there, because the people, everybody loves me in that small town, and they come to see me. Then you go to the adjacent ones.
I think it's the bearded woman, not Randy.
The bearded Rob.
Yeah.
So. You go to you count the 2 adjacent ones in this case that are empty, and you get money, because those people from the neighboring towns will come to see you,
right?
Because they haven't got a performance in their own town.
And you have one that's unlocked on your board as well.
Yeah.
So you're going to get a minimum of 2 money cards.
Yeah, and in this case, I would get 4, because I'd get 1, 2, 3, and then 1 for the one that was on my board.
Right.
So I would get 4 money cards coming to my hand. So the money cards, like I said, can be used to spend to buy the ticketed cards, or to spend to buy the bank cards, the money cards that are performers as well. The good news is, when you play one of those cards, that acts as a discount for future cards in that row. So like if you spend the money up front to buy an expensive one, like in this case, I spent 13 money right away and bought this performer, the strong lady. And when I did, you have to put it in the very first slot, but anything that has a lower number than that will push that one over. So when I placed it, anything I bought that was less money, I don't have to pay anything for in the future. It's free. If I pay something more, I have to pay the difference in the cost.
Right, which is still really cool.
Yeah, so getting an expensive one up front is not a bad deal, because you're sinking a lot of money in right away, but you get to reap the benefits of having that those free cards later. And then also it gives you kind of a guidepost for what you want to play. Because I got bank cards, for example, that gave me pedestal bonuses for having a blue performer, and that was a blue performer. So it fit nicely with my goal there for that row. That's the small cities. Now, if I go to small towns, if I go to a mid-sized town, this is where pedestals become super important.
Yeah.
So pedestals are gained by playing the bank cards, as I mentioned. You can also, whenever you do a performance, as Rob mentioned earlier, you can play any of the immediate effect cards. You can only do 1, but you might play one that gives you more pedestals, or you might play one that gives you additional ticketed card, or additional money, or additional victory points. You can choose whatever you want. But you count how many pedestals you have, and your board, any ones that are from cards, will be permanently on your board.
And the one other thing it'll look at, too, is it's also tied to the cards you play, but it'll look for an icon.
Yeah.
And it's like a specific type of performer that it's looking for in the city.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you got the cards that give you pedestal bonuses, but it also will give you an additional bonus, potentially, if you have the right card in your row.
So, based upon your total pedestal count, you will then get to place one of your tents in that mid-sized city.
Right.
And you will either get to choose to take tickets, or you can choose victory points. During the early part of the game, you're probably going to be choosing a lot of tickets, because it's hard to get ticket cards otherwise.
Right.
But getting those ticket cards are how you set up for the big cities. So
and in-game victory points.
Yeah, so
they're both very valuable.
Yeah, so the small cities kind of towns help you get to the mid-sized ones, and the mid-sized ones help you get to the big cities.
Right.
And the big cities generate lots of victory points. So you could take the victory points, and towards the end of the game, I shifted most of my strategy around to just taking victory points. But early in the game, to develop your board, you're going to want to get some of those ticketed cards. Then once you have those, the key is you want to set those up in a way that lets you score at the big cities. Now, the big cities have some very tight criteria on them. So when you go to a big city, it's got a number in the center and some art that represents a specific performer. It's not a category, it's a specific performer. So one of ours that we had was for strong people. So I had a strong lady that was the number 13, and that matched the center number. So I got to go towards that one right away. Then if you just have that card, you will get 6 victory points. If you then have a card that is an animal performer
on this specific scoring card,
on a specific side of the performer, so in this case it would have to be to the left, which I have a lion right there that is to the left of it, I get 4 additional victory points. And then you'll have a different one on the right. So in this case, it's a purple performer, which are the acrobats. They have to be on the right of it. So the one in the middle is the only one that has to be a specific performer, but the other ones, they can be part of the category. But if you manage to get everything to line up perfectly, you'll get 15 victory points. And then if you're the first to go to that city, you get a bonus of 3 victory points. So you could get a potential 18 points.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention there's a card that lets you play for 2 victory points as your immediate effect card that you play. So you could totally get 20 points in one fell swoop there.
And that's for each city if you play it right.
Right. So, in this game, I only got 3 of the 4 cities, but it was enough to give me, I got a pretty significant lead early in the game. You can get a lot of points that way. Then also the cards you put on your board are worth victory points. Mm-hmm. So the ticketed performers in particular have victory points printed at the top of them, but a lot of them also give you in-game scoring based upon conditions being met, where cards are to the left or right of them.
Or look for specific, like I got scoring for the number of train icons on my board.
And I had one for money icons, which was very unfortunate because I ended the game with just one. So you can max your board out and score a lot of points from just the in-game bonuses.
But I don't know if those are as much as the city bonuses, though. So that's probably my main criticism of the game. It's not a significant one, but it's very luck-based from my perspective, because looking at the different cities, all right, it's looking for a purple 9 in New York. I need to find a purple 9 to be able to go to New York. If I don't see that purple 9 ever come up, I can't go to New York and score that. Yeah. And so if it came up a lot of times, someone else would grab it before it was my turn. So then I still didn't get that opportunity. So there was several cities I couldn't go to because I never was able to find the cards I needed. And so I kind of wish that it makes sense why the rules set up that way for scoring, but I wish there was a different way to either mitigate that or maybe cycle through the deck or something to be able to maybe mitigate that luck a little bit. And that would have been a little bit more comfortable for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can cycle the deck. It's just, it takes a lot to do it. We didn't manage to do it in the course of this game. We cycled through the bank deck.
Yeah, but there's not a specific mechanism for cycling. You just have to, you either someone buys a bunch and hopefully then we can get a bunch of cards put out that way. But it didn't work fast enough for me to be able to really take advantage of scoring in the big cities the way I would have liked to have done it.
Yeah. Now, regardless of what type of performance you put on, when you do a performance, that's the key to making Barnum and Bailey's circus car.
They'll move.
So they're going to move one space counterclockwise around the outer perimeter of the board. And when they reach a major city, they stop, and there's a tile that gets flipped that tells you
Goes from Barnum and Bailey to the popcorn side.
Yeah, and that triggers at the end of getting around. So at the beginning of the game, that card is given to the person to the right of the first player.
Mm-hmm.
So that means it's going to let everybody get a chance to take a turn before it triggers. And then once we score that region, that card will pass to the person to hit to counterclockwise to that person. And so, therefore, it's going to keep moving around the table.
And so each region can score up to 10 points if you got the most tents in that area.
Yep.
So it goes from 10, 6 to 3.
Yeah. So, there are a lot of ways to score points in this game. There is. And then, so even though that region scored, you can still get points there. It's just having the majority of tents is not going to pay off anymore. No. You can
it only scores the one time.
Yeah, and you can only build a tent in a region one time. Not a region, but in a city one time.
And you're limited. That was. I think it's an interesting part of the game is where you really have to strategize where you want to put your tents because I ran out of tents. Yeah. And I could not do performances anymore. You're locked up.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of things to consider when you're playing this because you got to make sure you're balancing everything out to get what you want card-wise, manage your board well. You want to manage your victory points
and
well.
Your tents.
And your performance. And, your tent volume. So, I like all the strategy involved in this game. Yes, there is some luck with the card draws. But they do give you 5 cards that are face up to help mitigate that with the ticket ones, which that's good. The problem is I got stuck where one time I drew those 9s because I didn't want it. I took the 9 off the board and then I drew another 9, blind from the top. When you can't play 2 of the same number on the same row. I could have put it on a different row, but it would have not served any purpose really. So I just held on to that for the rest of the game for no reason. Because there was no point. There was never a point where I got over 10 cards at once. Miranda had that happen a few times, and I think you might have once. But I never had more than 10 cards the entire game. Miranda, I think you and Miranda both had more ways to get money cards than I did.
Yeah, I was able, I mean, as Randy mentioned, when you do a performance, it looks at the icons on your board, and I was getting an additional 3 money cards for every performance. Yeah. So I was able to get the cards that I could give you those, like either the bonuses for pedestals or those instant bonuses, but I wasn't able to get to the ticketed cards as much as I needed to.
This thing ramps up. It starts out slow because when you move, Barnum only moves 1 space. Right. But as the tents take up spaces, it skips all those. And you skip all of those when you move. So while I started out with 6 movement, at the end I only had 3 movement, but it felt like I had 6 movement because I could just skip over all those filled spaces.
I think that's a really good balancing mechanism. Yeah. I like that quite a bit.
So, as long as you don't cut yourself off. I mean, yes, you always have 1 printed on the board that will never get covered. But you could, if you're limited to 1 space movement, it's going to be tough.
And that was one of my one of the tough parts for me. And not a criticism of the game, I just didn't play it very well. But because of my limited movement, when I was finally able to get a 13 blue card to go perform in Chicago, I was on this side of the board, and I was only being able to move 3. So there was enough empty spaces that I couldn't hop over there quickly enough to be able to perform in another city. So, again, it's a big part of that strategy in the game.
Yeah. So, given, my thoughts on this game, I think the fact that it's so portable, I don't generally like small box games. This one feels like a big box game in a small box.
It does.
And I think they're the same ones that came up. Devir is the same ones that released Red Cathedral, which is another one that feels like a big box game in a small box. So, I liked Red Cathedral a lot. I like this one, I think, more than Red Cathedral. I'm probably going to go ahead and give this one an 8.5, just because the portability of it. If it weren't for the size of it, comparing it to a big box game, I probably wouldn't give it quite as high. But because of the portability of it, it's something I could take easily somewhere and get out and play something that feels more satisfactory to me than a typical small box game.
Now, I liked Red Cathedral, I think, a little bit more. The luck element to it, it's not a huge factor, but it did kind of sour it just a little bit for me. I just wish I could have been able to perform in the cities a little bit easier than what I was able to. So I think it's still a good game. It's a solid game for sure. I'm not an 8.5. I'm an 8.
Okay. Well, that's our thoughts on this game. If you've had a chance to play through Ring Circus, let us know what you thought of it. If you've enjoyed the circus before, let us know any experiences you've had.
I don't
with
think
carnies.
It's anything like the board game, though. I think it's a little different.
I will say, I one experience I had with carnies, I was at the state fair, and I got knocked over by a carny fight.
That is not represented in this game.
The ring toss person and the person at the basketball shooting got into an argument, and they came and started throwing blows, and they fell on top of me.
That's hilarious. Do you have anything similar?
Any interesting stories about fighting, carnies that came or anything, any fair experiences? We'd love to hear. So make sure you share them and, join us at the Big Top next time we play. All right. Bye.
Bye.